So you're getting ready for your London trip, right? Exciting times. But maybe there's a little voice in the back of your head wondering about staying safe in a big new city, especially, as a visitor.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be in the know, prepared, but definitely not like bogged down in endless worry.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today, keeping you, the London-bound traveler, feeling confident and secure.
That's right. For this deep dive specifically tailored for your upcoming visit, we've pulled together a range of sources to give you a really comprehensive picture,
Mhm.
safety and security for tourists in London.
Okay.
We're looking at a lively discussion from fellow travelers on Reddit sharing their experiences, some official foreign travel advice with a government's eye on visitors.
Right, the official line.
Exactly. And a dedicated travel guide article zeroing in on scams that specifically target tourists, which is super useful.
Oh, yeah.
And even insights from Transport for London on staying safe while you're using public transport to see the sights. So, a good mix.
So our mission, and one we're really focused on for you today, is to unpack all of this information kind of with a tourist's perspective in mind.
Hmm.
We want to give you the practical advice and the inside scoop so you can feel confident, secure, and absolutely ready to have an amazing time exploring London as a visitor. Okay, let's unpack this. The big question for any tourist heading to a new city: how safe is London, for tourists in general?
What's fascinating looking at this through the lens of a tourist experience is that across our sources, there's a pretty consistent message. London is generally a safe city for tourists.
Okay, that's good to hear straight off.
Yeah. On the Reddit thread, many users who have traveled there chime in to say it's comparable to any other major city a tourist might visit. One commenter even suggests it feels safer in tourist areas than places like Paris or Rome.
Oh, interesting. Why do you think that perception might exist?
Well, it could be a few things. Maybe the visible police presence in some areas, or maybe just the general vibe compared to other capitals.
Yeah, maybe. And it's not just anecdotal, right? The Plum Guide article we looked at backs this up with some data relevant to a tourist's peace of mind.
Absolutely. They point to London ranking 15th safest city globally in The Economist's 2021 Safe Cities Index, which, when you think about the sheer number of people visiting London every year and how vast the city
It's
is,
actually pretty reassuring.
it is. And they also make the point that for its size, the levels of street crime are relatively low in the areas where tourists, tend to spend their time.
That's good to hear. It paints a picture of a city where you can generally feel at ease as a visitor. However, we did see one voice on Reddit expressing concern, didn't we? Saying London's become full of crime recently.
That's true, and it's important to acknowledge those perceptions that some visitors might also hold or, hear about before they go.
Definitely.
However, it's also worth noting that another user in that same thread pretty quickly dismissed that particular comment, suggesting it wasn't really a credible viewpoint based on their own experiences as a frequent visitor.
Right, so maybe an outlier opinion.
Possibly. It highlights that while individual experiences can vary, the broader consensus, especially among those familiar with London, seems to lean towards it being a safe place for tourists.
Okay.
So, what does this all mean for you as you're planning your trip? It means you can probably relax on a fundamental level, but as with visiting any major city, especially one you're unfamiliar with, awareness is key.
Always.
And that brings us to some of the more specific concerns that our sources highlighted as being relevant to tourists. Pickpocketing came up quite a bit, didn't it?
It really did, yeah. The Reddit discussions from travelers and the scams article both put a big emphasis on pickpocketing as probably the most common crime tourists might encounter.
Right.
And the advice on avoiding it was pretty consistent too, focusing on those busy areas visitors flock to.
Yes. The recurring themes were around being particularly mindful of your belongings, especially in crowded places where tourists naturally congregate.
Like where specifically?
Think about when you're navigating the tube, walking down busy shopping streets like Oxford Street, or taking in the sights at Piccadilly Circus, or enjoying the atmosphere of Covent Garden.
Okay, the main hubs.
Exactly. Those bustling areas where it's easy for someone to get close without you realizing, and as a tourist, you might be more focused on looking up at the buildings than, your bag.
Right, so for us tourists, no flashing the fancy watches that might make us a target.
Probably wise.
And definitely no leaving your wallet hanging out in your back pocket, which one Reddit user humorously clarified.
Yeah, a necessary clarification perhaps for travelers from different places. The advice is sound, though. Keep wallets in front or inside pockets that are harder to access.
Gotcha.
And bags that can be properly closed, zippered, or buckled are a must for any tourist carrying valuables. Several Reddit users also warned against just holding your phone in your hand while walking around,
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
especially for consulting a map or taking photos. Apparently, that makes you a very easy target for a quick grab.
Ah, makes sense. And there was that specific cover and steal phone trick mentioned on Reddit, which sounds particularly devious for tourists who might be looking a bit lost while using their phones for directions.
Yeah, that one's sneaky. It's fascinating how these seemingly innocuous interactions can be used to target tourists who might be distracted or unsure of their way.
How does it work again?
The scam involves someone approaching you, maybe with a map, asking for directions, and using the map to subtly cover your phone, maybe on a table or in your hand while they snatch it.
Wow. Okay, need to watch out for that.
The advice shared on Reddit to make a lot of noise if your phone is stolen while hopefully you won't need it is a good tip for any tourist to keep in mind. It might deter the thief or alert others.
Right, good to know. Beyond pickpocketing, the Dedicated Scams article really opened our eyes to a few other things tourists should watch out for. Rickshaws were a big one, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
They seem to operate a lot in those central tourist areas. Oh, those jazzy, music-blasting rickshaws. They look like a fun way to get around, especially for tourists wanting a quick, scenic ride. But apparently they can be a real tourist trap.
Exactly. The article points out that unlike the iconic licensed black cabs, rickshaws are unregulated.
Oh, okay.
So they can technically charge tourists whatever they think they can get away with. The common scam seems to be agreeing on a price beforehand, which might sound reasonable,
And
and then being hit with a much higher fare at the end of the ride, especially if the tourist is unfamiliar with typical transportation costs in London.
ouch. So the advice.
It's pretty clear for tourists, if you don't want to risk being significantly overcharged, it's best to just avoid them altogether and stick to more regulated forms of transport, like the tube, buses, or black cabs.
Makes sense. And then there's the classic one that unfortunately still catches tourists out.
Yeah.
Buying tickets off the street for attractions or shows.
This is a perennial issue, isn't it? In any major tourist destination with a big theater scene.
Seems like it.
The article rightly warns against buying event or theater tickets from anyone approaching you on the street, especially in busy tourist hubs like Piccadilly Circus or Leicester Square.
Where all the theaters are.
Precisely. These tickets are very likely to be fake, maybe already used, or just significantly overpriced. They're preying on tourists who might not know where to buy legitimate tickets.
So where should tourists buy them?
Stick to reputable sources. The venue's official website is best, or well-known ticketing platforms like TodayTix. The official TKTS booth in Leicester Square is also a safe bet for same-day discounts.
Okay, good advice.
And that also goes for those stalls claiming to sell half-price tickets. They're often marked up first, so it's always worth doing a quick comparison to official prices if you can.
It's almost counterintuitive, but you can even be scammed into paying for things that are actually free, which is something tourists might not realize.
This raises an important point about a tourist's awareness of what London offers for free.
Yeah, lots of museums are free entry, right?
Exactly, and things like the changing the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace. But the scams article mentions people trying to sell tickets to unsuspecting tourists for stuff like that, which is completely free to watch from public viewing areas.
Unbelievable.
The key takeaway for any visitor is to always double-check if an attraction truly requires a ticket, and if it does, only get them from official channels. Don't be pressured into buying something on the street for an event you thought was free.
Right. And then there are those age-old street games like the cup and ball trick, often seen in tourist hotspots. I feel like everyone's heard about these, but people, perhaps in the holiday spirit, still get caught out.
Well, what's fascinating here is the psychology of it, especially how it targets tourists who might be more open to a bit of lighthearted fun or think they've spotted an easy way to win some money.
They make it look easy, don't they?
They often have someone who looks like a regular passerby win around, seemingly at random, to entice other tourists to play. But as the article explains, these games are rigged.
How so?
They've planted participants, the ball mysteriously disappears, your money's gone. The best advice for any tourist is simply not to engage with them at all. Just walk on by, no matter how tempting it looks.
Got it. Walk on by. Now, rogue Wi-Fi is another modern concern that tourists relying on public networks should be aware of, right?
Definitely. You're looking for that free connection to check your maps or message home.
Yeah. Happens all the time.
But it could cost you your personal information. Scammers can set up fake free Wi-Fi networks in areas frequented by tourists, designed to look legitimate, maybe mimicking the name of a nearby coffee shop,
Sneaky.
to steal your personal information, passwords, financial details if you connect.
So what's the protection?
The article recommends using a virtual private network, VPN, to encrypt your data if you do need to connect to public Wi-Fi. Or alternatively, as a tourist, they suggest maybe getting an eSIM.
Ah, for mobile data.
Yeah, which gives you mobile data and can often be a really convenient and secure option compared to hunting for potentially dodgy public networks.
Good tip. The clipboard or newspaper scam sounds so sneaky too, and could easily target a tourist just sitting in a cafe minding their own business.
It is very sneaky. Someone might approach you, maybe start a friendly chat or ask for directions. And while you're distracted, they subtly place a newspaper or clipboard over your phone or wallet that you've maybe placed on the table,
Oh no.
and then swipe it as they move away. The advice for tourists here is simple but crucial. Don't leave valuables on tables in public places, not even for a second.
Keep them secure.
Keep them secure in your bag or in a front pocket, and definitely not a back pocket where they're easily accessible.
And the flower scam, who would have thought that a seemingly kind gesture could have a hidden agenda aimed at tourists?
Exactly. Someone might offer you a seemingly free flower, maybe a rose, as a gesture of goodwill.
Oh, how nice. Or not.
Or not, because then they'll aggressively demand payment afterwards, often targeting tourists who might feel awkward or pressured into paying.
So just say no.
The article's advice is clear for any visitor. Politely decline any free items offered by strangers in the street to avoid this kind of situation. Just a polite no thank you and keep walking.
Okay. Now, switching gears a bit from these more traditional scams, phone snatching on electric bikes sounds like a newer, more aggressive type of crime that popped up in the Reddit discussions among travelers to London.
This is a concerning trend, particularly in central London areas that are popular with tourists. Thieves on electric bikes or scooters can quickly ride past and grab phones right out of people's hands.
Just like that.
Just like that, especially if you're walking and maybe distracted by sightseeing or using your phone for directions, and then they make a fast getaway.
Scary. What's the advice there?
The police advice mentioned on Reddit is for tourists to be particularly aware of their surroundings and, crucially, to walk on the inside of the sidewalk away from the street when you're using your phone.
Ah, so further from the curb.
Exactly. One user even shared a story about their black belt trainer having their phone snatched this way, highlighting that it can happen to anyone, regardless of how aware you think you are.
Wow. It definitely makes you think twice about having your phone out near the road as a tourist trying to navigate. Westminster Bridge also got a specific mention on Reddit as an area where tourists should be extra cautious.
Yes, that area being a major tourist thoroughfare with iconic views.
Always packed.
Always packed. It seems to be a hot spot for both the Cup and Ball Street games we discussed, and also for pickpocketing. The games often act as a distraction for other criminal activity.
So, double trouble there.
Pretty much. It's an area where tourists really need to be extra vigilant and keep a close eye on their belongings while taking in the sights.
Good to know. And finally, on the topic of things to avoid as a tourist, the warning about American candy shops on Reddit was quite surprising.
It was, wasn't it? The Reddit comment suggests that some of these shops, which have become quite prominent in tourist areas like Oxford Street,
Yeah, they're everywhere.
might be selling expired or unsafe food, and could even be involved in less savory activities, potentially money laundering, according to some users. While it's hard to definitively verify those claims from just a Reddit thread, it's certainly something for tourists to be aware of if they're considering buying snacks from those types of establishments. Maybe stick to regular supermarkets or corner shops.
Okay, fair enough. Right, let's move on to getting around London public transport. What did our sources tell us about staying safe on the tube and buses as a visitor?
Transport for London themselves have a lot of great advice aimed at keeping everyone safe, including tourists who might be unfamiliar with the system.
What's their main message?
Their main message, which was also echoed by locals on Reddit, is simply to be aware of your surroundings at all times.
Standard advice, but important.
Absolutely. Just like in any crowded environment that a tourist might encounter, keeping an eye on what's happening around you is crucial. And TfL emphasizes keeping your belongings secure.
Zipped bags again.
Yep, bags zipped, and phones, wallets, and purses out of sight to minimize the risk of opportunistic theft. Leaving bags unattended, even for a moment, is a big no-no.
Right, for security reasons, too.
Exactly, both for security reasons and to prevent them from being reported as suspicious items, which can cause delays for everyone.
Journey planning seems important, too, especially for tourists who might not know the best routes.
Yes, TfL recommends planning your journeys in advance using their TfL Go app or the online journey planner.
That sounds helpful.
It can be a real help for visitors. This not only helps you get where you need to go efficiently, saving you time and reducing the chances of looking lost, but it also means you're less likely to be standing around looking confused, which can sometimes make you a target.
Good point. What about taxis?
When it comes to taxis, the advice is very clear for tourists. Only use licensed black cabs that you can hail on the street.
The classic ones.
Those are the ones. Or use pre-booked minicabs through a licensed operator or a reputable app. The Plum Guide specifically warns tourists against taking unsolicited cabs that might approach you, especially outside busy stations or tourist attractions. Don't get in those.
Right, stick to official ones.
Exactly. And TfL has their See It, Say It Sorted campaign.
What's that about?
It encourages everyone, including tourists, to report any unattended items or suspicious behavior they might see while using public transport.
Like what kind of behavior?
Could be someone acting suspiciously, maybe like photographing security arrangements
Yeah.
or simply leaving a bag unattended on a train or platform.
And how do you report it?
They provide several ways. Tell a police officer or a member of TfL staff, text the British Transport Police on 61016, or call 999 in an emergency.
Okay, good to know those options exist.
It's important for tourists to remember that both the police and TfL take these reports seriously. It helps keep everyone safe.
For those of us tourists not used to driving on the left, crossing roads can be a bit of a hazard. Reddit had a good reminder about this.
That's a really practical tip, maybe easily overlooked, especially for tourists who are used to traffic flowing the other way.
Yeah, you automatically look the wrong way sometimes.
You do. Remember that in the UK, traffic will be coming from the opposite direction to what you might be accustomed to. Pay close attention to the painted reminders on the roads, look left or look right.
They actually paint that on the road.
They do in many tourist areas, which is helpful. And, of course, mind the gap when you're getting on and off the tube. These are simple but vital reminders for any visitor.
Mind the gap. Classic. And for any tourist feeling a bit anxious on public transport in a new city, Plum Guide had a couple of good suggestions to enhance their comfort.
They did. They suggest avoiding empty train carriages, especially late at night. Maybe try and sit where there are other people around.
Makes sense.
And on buses, maybe sitting downstairs near the driver and the exits if you feel safer being in a more visible spot. These are small things that can make a big difference to a tourist's peace of mind.
Definitely. Now let's talk about blending in a bit. General tips that came up across our sources for staying safe as a tourist.
Right, sort of general awareness stuff.
The look confident advice from Reddit seems key for any tourist. Even if you're not entirely sure where you're going,
Fake it till you make it.
kind of. Acting like you do can make you less of a target for scams or petty theft. If you are lost, the suggestion was to duck into a shop to quickly check your map or directions.
Rather than standing on a busy street corner looking bewildered.
Exactly. Makes you less vulnerable.
Absolutely. And the advice to avoid dressing in a way that screams tourist also came up.
What does that even mean, though? Like no giant Union Jack t-shirts.
Maybe. Or just generally, while you don't need to overhaul your wardrobe, trying to blend in a bit with the locals can make you less conspicuous as a visitor. Maybe avoid walking around with huge maps constantly out, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Practical things like using a phone tether or lanyard and carrying a zippered crossbody bag without prominent logos were also recommended by experienced travelers on Reddit.
Crossbody bags seem popular advice.
Yeah, harder to snatch and you can keep them in front of you. Ways to keep your belongings secured and less of a target.
Being familiar with your basic route and the general layout of the areas you plan to visit beforehand is another good one for tourists.
Definitely helps. The less you're fumbling with maps and looking completely lost, the better.
And it's probably best for visitors not to be constantly glued to their phones while walking around, as it makes them less aware of their surroundings.
Minimizing phone distractions is definitely a smart move for any tourist in a busy city. Easy to bump into someone, or worse, not see a potential hazard or thief.
True.
And a more subtle piece of advice from Reddit was to maybe be discreet about where you're from.
Really? Why?
Not necessarily volunteering that information to everyone who asks, especially if you're from a place known for having lots of tourists. Just a bit of caution, perhaps.
Okay. And when it comes to panhandling or buskers you encounter?
The suggestion was not to offer anything directly, maybe give to established charities instead. The reasoning given was that others might be watching where you keep your money if you pull out your wallet on the street.
Ah, okay. The Oyster card tip was interesting too, especially for tourists using public transport.
Yeah, recommending a physical Oyster card over using your phone or contactless payment card directly on the readers,
Was that logic there?
and keeping it separate from your main wallet. That way, if your Oyster card somehow gets lost or stolen, it's less of a financial hit and less disruptive than losing your main bank card or having your phone compromised.
That's actually quite smart.
It's a good way for tourists to minimize risk. Splitting up your valuables cash, credit cards, and ID, and leaving some perhaps in a safe place in your accommodation is another smart strategy mentioned on Reddit for any traveler. Don't carry everything at once.
Standard travel advice, but always worth repeating. And for those tourists planning on enjoying London's pub scene, there was some specific advice about alcohol consumption.
Yes, particularly for those visitors who aren't used to drinking alcohol, maybe, or the strength of some traditional British pints. They can be stronger than you expect.
Good warning.
The advice is sensible. Go steady, look after your travel companions, never leave your drinks unattended,
Never.
and stick together as a group, especially when navigating a new city at night after a few drinks. Don't wander off alone if you're unfamiliar with the area.
Solid advice anywhere, really. Finally, Plum Guide brings it back to basics for tourists with the reminder that common sense is key.
Ultimately, yeah, most safety comes down to that.
And they also had a lighthearted but practical tip specifically for visitors likely to be doing a lot of walking.
Yeah.
Wear comfortable shoes and pack some plasters.
Oh, absolutely essential for London. You will walk miles. Good
Uh-huh.
shoes are not optional.
Definitely noted. Now, before we wrap up, Plum Guide also gave some insights into specific areas of London, some suggested as potentially safer and more convenient for first-time visitors when choosing accommodation, and a few they recommended perhaps avoiding.
This can be really helpful for tourists trying to decide where to base themselves, can't it? It's a huge city.
For sure. So, which areas did they highlight?
They highlight Fitzrovia as central, well-connected by public transport, and relatively quiet at night, which could be appealing to visitors.
Okay, central, quieter.
Nice. Hampstead gets a strong recommendation for its more relaxed, leafy kind of village feel, while still having good transport links into central London on the Northern Line.
Sounds lovely.
And for Notting Hill, they suggest sticking to the Holland Park and Notting Hill Gate areas to get the best experience, noting its charm and good amenities for tourists. Famous movie location, too, of course.
Of course. On the other hand, they suggest first-time visitors might want to avoid staying in Tottenham.
Yeah, mainly because it's further out and doesn't have as many of the main tourist attractions right there. It just means more travel time into the center.
Okay. What else?
Croydon is mentioned as being a bit further out still, with relatively higher crime rates reported historically, and again, a longer journey into central London. And Brixton, while known for its vibrant nightlife and cultural scene.
Heard good things about Brixton Market.
Yeah, it's got a great buzz, but it has had a history of higher crime rates, although the guide does note it is becoming safer due to gentrification. Still, maybe better suited for more experienced travelers rather than a first-time tourist focused on the main sites.
Okay, so things to consider when booking.
It's important for tourists to remember these are just suggestions based on general safety and convenience for first-time visitors, primarily focused on seeing the main sites. Different areas appeal to different people, obviously, but these recommendations can be a good starting point for choosing accommodation.
Definitely. Finally, what about safety at night in London for tourists who might be out exploring or enjoying the nightlife?
Plum Guide reassures visitors that there aren't any official no-go zones in London, which is good to know if you're planning on being out after dark.
That's reassuring.
Their advice is pretty standard, really. Be more careful if you're out alone late at night, stay vigilant about your surroundings, plan your journey home in advance.
Know how you're getting back.
Exactly. Stick to well-lit and busier roads where possible, and use licensed taxis or reputable ride-sharing services like Uber to get around, rather than trying to walk long distances late at night through unfamiliar areas.
Sensible stuff.
They also mention London's extensive CCTV coverage, which, might offer some additional peace of mind to visitors knowing there's a lot of surveillance.
True. So to bring it all together with a focus on your upcoming trip, what's the key takeaway for our listener as they prepare for their London adventure?
Well, I think it's this. While it's absolutely important to be aware of potential risks, just like in any major city that attracts a lot of tourists,
You gotta be smart.
you do. But London is generally a safe place for visitors. By taking some sensible precautions, like being mindful of your belongings in crowded areas, being aware of common scams targeting tourists, using common sense when getting around you, can really set yourself up for a fantastic and secure trip.
Yeah, it sounds like awareness, not anxiety, is the goal.
Exactly. Being proactive and informed as a tourist doesn't mean you have to be anxious or constantly on edge. It actually empowers you to relax and fully enjoy everything that London, with all its history and vibrancy, has to offer its visitors.
And on that note, perhaps the most valuable thing you can take away from this deep dive, specifically for your time as a tourist in London, is how understanding these nuances, the common sense tips, the specific scams to watch out for, the considerations about different areas, allows for a more authentic and less anxious travel experience.
Knowing is half the battle. Right.
Right. Being in the know lets you truly appreciate the richness and vibrancy of London without that constant underlying worry about safety.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the difference between the risks we might imagine before a trip and the actual reality of experiencing a new place when you feel prepared and informed as a traveler.